Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the September CD Cart User Forum. My name is Christy McKinley, and I am the National Conservation Desktop Team Lead for the NRCS National Headquarters. And then I work in the Conservation Planning Branch. Since August of 2024, NRCS and the National Conservation Planning Partnership have co-sponsored. This is our 8th CD Cart User Forum. These are held primarily for field staff and partners to learn more about our field tools. All right, you can go to the next slide. And one more slide. There we go. All right. I just want to say a big thank you to all the states for supporting the user forums. We've averaged over 2,000 attendees since August of 24. With most of the attendees having less than 10 years of experience. So we really are appreciative of this being used in a broader audience and you participating with us. This is the forum that allows you to get feedback or allows us to get feedback directly from the field staff, which allows us to make improvements to our tools. Today, you'll see one of those improvements from all of the recommendations related to being able to create better plan maps. So we're real excited to show that today. We do have one more user forum scheduled on November 19th. And then in that forum, we're going to discuss updates to resource concerns, contracting efficiencies, planner flexibility, and easements 101. So I hope you can join us for that. Next slide. All right, so for today, the tools we are demonstrating are involve NRCS responsibilities related to workload prioritization, like I said earlier, creating better plan maps for our customers, and how to use the CART dashboard that was released earlier this year. We do have plenty of time at the end to answer your questions, so please feel free to use the Q&A to post your questions in the chat. And now I would like to introduce Jennifer Chen, who is going to kick off our workload prioritization tool.
All righty, very much appreciate that, Christy. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jennifer Chen, and I work with the Conservation Planning Technical Assistance Division. And I, along with Mary Williams, who's on the Financial Assistance Program Division, are your national points of contact for the workload prioritization tool. So today I'm planning to provide an overview of the tool, how it might help in your state, how to access and use the tool, as well as share some example questions that might be useful to help prioritize assistance within your state. We'll wrap up with a brief demo of the tool's functionality, as well as a sneak peek into how it's set up in CART. So let's go ahead and get started. Next slide, thank you. Excellent. So just opening remarks regarding the workload prioritization tool. So it is a tool states can use to help to prioritize your work. It doesn't prioritize who to work with, it prioritizes which order to work with folks who request assistance within your state. The workload prioritization tool is designed to take place prior to completing assessments, planning, etc., to help prioritize that workload really early in the process. So that's where we see that efficiency, is that we can prioritize the order with which we service our customers early in that process. The tool works on a 100-point scale threshold behind the scenes, and what those points do is sum together, and based on the total amount of points, indicate a qualitative priority of high, medium, or low. And again, those are based off of questions that the state can populate and use that are most efficient for the state in terms of prioritizing those requests. It is an optional tool, so it's not something that has to be used. But again, if your state is interested in looking at using a prioritization tool, this would be the route to go. So I want to make sure to present how it works and give you a little bit of background information here. There is a limitation that only one tool can be published for use within a state, and it must adhere to policy requirements. However, there's a lot of flexibility in how the tool functions, so that if you want to use a tool to help prioritize different program requests, different types of assistance, etc., you've got those options within the tool. And we'll see some of that here in just a little bit. You can see on the right is just an example of what the prioritization tool looks like, but we're going to see a bit more of that as I go through the remainder of my slides. So when might a state want to use a workload prioritization tool? Next slide, please. All right. So again, it is an optional tool, but a state might decide that it would be beneficial. And some of the situations where a state might decide to go ahead and utilize this tool might be if there's been a history of a greater demand for assistance within a program than there has been funding within the state. So again, if we're looking at prioritizing the order with which we work with some of these requests, we might do so because we know we've had a lot of demand historically. There's also an option for or opportunity to include questions to prioritize assistance based on state deadlines, published state deadlines. And one of the things you're going to hear me say multiple times as I talk about this is making sure that the criteria that are used to prioritize are very clearly identified and are based on published communicated information that's been transparent to both the client as well as our staff. Also, states have utilized this tool to prioritize those applicants who have remained on schedule with prior work or are new clients relative to other applicants who might have had a history of failing to properly operate or maintain practices, have had prior contract terminations, things like that. And then there's also an opportunity, and some states have utilized this to prioritize requests that occur in particular geographic areas. I do want to note a couple items down here at the bottom of what the tool is not. The tool is not to be used to make eligibility or ranking determinations. Again, this is just prioritizing the order of the work. And so therefore the tool can be used to prioritize those field visits and the order with which we do those to enable the completion of our assessment planning process. So again, just a little bit of additional information there to kind of get you thinking about if this is something that might be useful for your state to consider. Next slide. All right, so how does the state use a workload prioritization tool? So the burden of most of this work falls onto the state office staff, and that's okay. But the state office staff was responsible for creating the workload prioritization tool display group and cart, and then they go through the approval process, and then once it's published, the tool displays itself within Conservation Desktop through the requests module. We do recommend that if an applicant is applying for multiple programs, to go ahead and create a request in CD for each program, and we'll see how that looks here in a little bit, but that just helps to organize the information if a client is interested in assistance for more than one program. And again, as I mentioned previously, screening questions, prioritization questions can be explained, should be able to be explained to the client to ensure transparency. And again, I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like when I go into some more detail. The other thing to keep in mind is that if your state is going to use a prioritization tool, then all eligible applications within that assigned priority must be ranked and assessed. So again, we talk about a qualitative identifier of high, medium, or low priority. If you are using this tool, then any request that's ranked with any request that's assigned a high priority will need to be evaluated under the same conditions. And then once all those high priority requests are serviced, then we would move on to the medium priority. And again, if any medium priority requests are serviced, then all of those medium priority requests are serviced and then on down to the low. So that's the order of operations there. The other thing to keep in mind as a state is if you do want to consider using a tool, you will need to work through this process and get the prioritization tool published before ranking any applications in the program that will use the screening. And this is because we want to make sure that we're treating every assistance request equitably. And then a note there at the bottom for those who are familiar with ProTracks, that this priority level, though it does display within the Conservation Desktop interface, it does require the priority level to be added manually to applications in ProTracks if that's applicable. All right, next slide. All right, so again, just wanted to reiterate this item here that it is optional to use the prioritization tool, but if you do want to prioritize, this is the tool to do it. So no hard copy prioritization tools, no outside of the system tools. We need to ensure that if we are going to prioritize our requests, that we're using this method to do so. And again, that's because of clarity and transparency, as well as documenting those decisions. We have methods within the interface that using this prioritization tool allows us to document those decisions. Next slide. All right, so now we're going to get a little bit more into the logistics of what you'll expect on your end. So if I'm going to first kind of talk through the user end, so the field staff, most of the folks that are going to be accessing this, who are going to be reviewing questions and answering those questions, will be doing so through Conservation Desktop. So if your state staff have published a display group and cart, you as the user will see that information appear in the new request window in the Conservation Assistance Request module in CD. There are particular types of requests where these questions will pop up. And so if you were to select create either a new request for a site visit or a new conservation plan for your state, and if your state has a prioritization tool published, these questions are automatically going to feed into that request module window. Excuse me, not only can you utilize a new request, but if you have an existing request in the system as well, you can also edit that existing request to display as well as answer the workload prioritization tool questions. So it works in either. And if you're unsure or unfamiliar with this, I just want to point out we do have our CD cart lesson plans that go through the process of working through the tool for new requests as well as existing requests, and those plans do so, the lesson plans do so in quite good detail. So I haven't covered all that here, but just wanted to point you to the lesson plans as an additional reference. Next slide. And again, just to kind of reiterate the flexibility that the tool offers, again, we're limited to only being able to publish one of these tools per state. So we'll want to make sure to capture anything you're wanting to prioritize within that tool. So as a state, if you're thinking of doing this, again, you want to be thinking through all the various types of requests that you're going to want to prioritize and be sure to reflect those all in the same tool because we can only publish the one. Having said that, there's, like I said, a lot of flexibility built in the tool. One of the things you'll see as you look at the details, if interested, and the lesson plans is question conditionality. And essentially what that means is certain questions are only going to pop up in the tool based on responses to prior questions. And so in this example here, the bottom question on the left says, which conservation program is this request for? And then what the tool has done, or what we've done with the tool, is we've set it up such that depending on the program that's selected, different questions will appear. So again, we can build in a lot of different questions, but we don't have to make folks go through all of those each and every time because we can set up conditionality so that they only appear when they're applicable. Again, questions on how to do that, again, you can certainly welcome to reach out to myself or Mary Williams as you move forward in progressing and looking at doing this for your state. Next slide, please. All right, and you're going to see me go through this in our demo that's coming up here in a little bit, but again, we work through the workload prioritization tool by accessing the CD request module. Once we've answered all the questions for a workload prioritization tool, the priority level of high, medium, or low will display based on those responses, and we'll see that within the interface. However, we still need to work through the rest of the request. So if you're working on a new request and you've answered those tool questions, you're going to want to hit next and continue through the request workflow in order to fully create that request. And you see some of the screen capture there at the bottom that walks through that workflow. Again, as I mentioned, if you have a particular request that's associated to interest in a program, you can specify that program within the interface so that it shows up not only with the request, but on some summary reports that we'll talk about here in just a little bit. Next slide, please. All right, so as you work through that request workflow and you finish that process out, not only does the system save those workload prioritization tool responses and that high, medium, or low designation that you've identified, but it also saves a report, a workload prioritization tool questionnaire. It's automatically generated and associated with the request, and it's also automatically uploaded to DMS for storage. So this is just a screen that shows what that looks like. The red box on the left there shows you where to find the document within the details of the request. And then on the right is just a screenshot that shows you the report itself. So there's some information at the top about the client, priority, et cetera, as well as the request ID this is associated with. Next slide, please. All right, so not only is this information contained within each request and available through the request details, but users and folks at the state level can also run reports to get at this information in a more bulk manner. So there's a report within Conservation Desktop called the Assistance Request Report, and that's what I'm showing there on screen. And when you run that, you can pull a report of all the assistance requests that are available within the given search area, whether that's statewide or a certain subset of offices, et cetera, based on the filter parameters that you identify. But what's nice about this is that, of course, you can export this to Excel and filter, sort, do all the other things that you want to do, but it helps you to see how many requests are in the system. It displays the priority level associated with each of those requests. And then it also indicates if there is a request that doesn't have a priority level assigned. So it's helpful to help monitor, again, how many are coming in that are high, medium, or low, as well as requests that we might have received that haven't been prioritized yet. And we might see that because there are requests that come in not only through Conservation Desktop and through our internal processes, but we can also get requests coming in from our farmers.gov clients. So we want to make sure to capture those and service those clients as well. Next slide, please. All right, I just want to point this slide out. This is really targeted to the state office staff, the folks who are going to be responsible for creating one of these tools. But I know we've got a large audience of different folks out there, so I wanted to touch on this just a little bit. The process for doing this starts with developing a draft workload prioritizations display group and cart. And then you'll work with Mary and myself, and we will help you answer questions, etc. You can publish that, or we'll publish that for you so that you can see it in the training environment, test it out, try it out, make sure it's all working correctly in the way that your state needs. And then once you do that, we go through a review process just to make sure that everything aligns with policy, etc. And then once that's all finished, then we can go ahead and publish it in the production environment for your state to use. So again, just wanting to relay that process here for those of you who might be responsible for doing this within your state. The state office staff usually that work on this, it's a coordinated effort with programs and your technology or eco-sci staff with regards to those folks that have that state business tools coordinator role. But I want to make sure and emphasize that it is a coordinated effort within the state to develop the questions, identify the priorities, etc. Next slide. All right. Lastly, before we kick over to a little demo that walks through the process, I just wanted to point out resources that are available to support you. We have a workload prioritization tool SharePoint site. Link is contained in the slide, and you see the screenshot of what it looks like there on the screen. This SharePoint site includes lesson plans. It includes some recorded demos that go into some more detail on the workload prioritization tool setup and use, as well as additional information and links, as you can see there. We also have a link to our national instruction, which is the policy regarding the workload prioritization tool guidance. And again, just to reiterate, if you have questions, your national points of contact are myself, Jennifer Chen, or Mary Williams. So with that, let's go ahead and shift gears and walk through a quick demo of how to use the workload prioritization tool, and then I'll show you just a bit on the back end setup side that's relevant for the state office staff. Client loaded in our table of contents. We're going to create a new request for this client and demonstrate the workload prioritization tool. All right, so I'm going to do this by going to New Request. I'm going to select the type of request. And you can see just by selecting this information, a workload prioritization tool appears below. However, I want to note that the tool that's going to display is going to be based on the state in the request. In this example, the client is actually requesting from the District of Columbia. So I need to update the state to reflect that. And you can see, as I do so, the workload prioritization tool updates to reflect the specific tool or display group that was published in CART to support the District of Columbia. I'll complete the rest of the service center county information and scroll down to display this in more detail. So the first question relates to the type of client George Grigas is, and in this example, I'll say George is a veteran farmer. The next question gets to the type of request this is for. There are a series of options. Some of these are for technical assistance only, and then several of these options are for requests that tie to the interest in a financial assistance program. And they have a different weight or priority based on how this was set up in CART. For example, if I were to select that this was a site visit for a recreational pond, that's something that is prioritized relatively low. So therefore, when I select this response, the tool is complete and identifies a priority level of low. Conversely, if I were to select that George, is interested in applying for a financial assistance program, this is something that is going to be a higher priority to evaluate. However, we need more information. So this is set up such that when a response is selected indicating that the client is interested in financial assistance, additional conditional questions, so those conditions are met and conditional questions appear at the bottom. The first conditional question asks the user to specify which conservation program this request is for. This example, we'll go ahead and select equip. And again, selecting equip triggers yet additional conditional questions. Again, the user is only prompted to answer these based on these selections made above. So in the District of Columbia, the prioritization tool is set up to prioritize based on a few criteria. One of those is the prior performance of the client. So you can see here, there are several options to indicate the history that this client has had with the office or the agency. Has the client had prior contracts or agreements? Are they on schedule, or had they been terminated, or had they had a failure to properly maintain practices in a previous contract? Again, depending on the response to this question, different points are going to be assigned to trigger either a high, medium, or low priority. For example, if the user had failed to properly operate and maintain those practices, we would select that option and result in a lower priority. We'll see that here. In addition to prior performance, the District of Columbia is also prioritizing requests based on client responsiveness. So how responsive has the client been to provide information to the office, either by the published application batching deadline, application ranking deadline, or neither. So if a client is more responsive in getting information back to the office in a timely way, that will result in a higher priority request than another client who hadn't been able to respond or hadn't responded as timely, assuming all other things are equal. Well, let's go ahead and just select ranking deadline here. And then the last criteria you see here is based on a geographic target area. Is the land in or out of a target area based on this project? And if the answer is yes, you can see here the priority level is set to low. And that goes back to the points assigned to the response option up here. Because the client has a prior history of failing this request would be considered low. Conversely, if George has had one or more contracts and everything is on schedule, there has been no history of poor performance, we could select this option up here at the top. All other things being equal, now this priority level is set to high. So again, this is just an example of how priority questions and responses can be set up behind the scenes by your state office staff to allow delineation of requests based on criteria the state wants to prioritize. Again, additional questions would populate based on whether I were selecting a different program. Again, conditional questions if it were CSP, ASAP-WRE, RCPP, or something else. I do want to point out, though, that with regards to the conservation program request question, we have several programs listed here. We do also have an other category, which is more of a catch-all. If I were to select that George was interested in a conservation program other than what's specifically listed here, you can see the tool is complete and assigns a priority level of high. This is done specifically because if we are going to use a workload prioritization tool to prioritize requests, we have to have clear and transparent criteria to prioritize against, just like I showed with the equip example. However, if we don't have that information included in the workload prioritization tool, say, again, we're selecting other here, we're stopping with the prioritization tool, but we're going to treat this request as a high priority. We're going to continue with the assessment, the planning and ranking, etc. So again, if we're using a workload prioritization tool, we need to ensure that the questions and information that we've included in that are clear and transparent and understandable by both the office and the client. So let's go back to our program example. Again, going back to equip as an option and displaying now these conditional questions based on equip, I'm going to go back and select the options I had shown previously. But as I do that, I want you to pay attention to how the responses are written here. Again, this is based on prior performance. Each of these responses starts out to say, as of the application cutoff date, the client, etc. whether they're on schedule, off schedule, had a termination, etc. But all of these responses begin with that language of as of the application cutoff date, because that provides a clear line of demarcation. There is a published application cutoff date that the office can point back to say, as of this date, this was the status of the client's prior agreements, okay, versus not specifying any date. And then it's very difficult to point back to say, as of such and such time, this was the status of George's prior agreements. We'll go ahead and select this. And then similarly, as I mentioned below here, client responsiveness. Has the client responded? Well, again, we want to make sure we're clear and transparent. Has the client responded by when? And that's why we've included specific language in here that points to a batching or a ranking deadline, both of which would have been communicated to both the office and the client. Okay, so I hope that helps just kind of point out how you can utilize the workload prioritization tool as a state to include certain criteria that you want to prioritize against, and also gives you some indication as to how the language should be set up to make sure that it is clear and transparent and easily explainable to the client. There are more question options available in the draft workload prioritization tool in CART. If any state is interested, we can certainly dig into more of those options and examples. But for the sake of this demo, I'm going to go ahead and continue. As I mentioned, in order to save this workload prioritization tool response, I need to complete the request workflow. So I'll go ahead and select next. I'm going to update the program this request is associated with based on equip. And I can also add in the comments additional information. In this example, I'm going to put in the application number because I know the application number for George's submitted 1200. Select next. The request from the District of Columbia. So I'm going to navigate over to that area and drop a pin. And then I can assign the request and add a due date if I desire. I'll leave these as is and create that request. All right, so now if I look at view requests, I'll be able to see that new request listed here for George Grigas. Again, you can see here the priority level is displayed, as well as some additional information in the request. Now let's take a look at the request details. Okay, so if I look at the details of the request, I can see again additional information up here at the top. And what I also see down here below is a section called Documents. So as I created that workload prioritization tool by answering the questions, the system was saving that information. And what it also does is it generates a workload prioritization questionnaire or a PDF that displays both the questions and the responses that I provided. And you can see those listed here. Not only is the document created, but the document is also uploaded to DMS automatically. Note that the document type is categorized as Other Request, and the title is defaulted to Workload Prioritization Questionnaire. You can find this under the Documents section for this client. The last thing I want to point out on this conservation desktop side of the workload prioritization tool workflow is a report option. So states, managers, et cetera, who want to track the status of requests and workload prioritization tools responses, aka high, medium, or low priority, can do so using the assistance request report. Go to that. I'm going to go ahead and select the area that I was working in, the District of Columbia. I'm going to leave the rest of the responses as all, set the fiscal year to the current fiscal year, and run the report. Now, I will note here that the request that we just populated for George Grigas is not going to show. Because this is a report, it is actually using MARTed data, and so it will require an overnight refresh in order for newly added requests to appear. However, we can see there is some history of some other requests already loaded in the system for the District of Columbia. We have several different clients. We can see we have the priority level. We can also see here that we have a request from farmers.gov without a priority level. So again, this is a great report for managers not only to monitor how many requests are coming in, how many are high, medium, or low priority, but then also indicate where maybe some priority questions need to be populated. So again, this would indicate, hey, there's a request in from farmers. Let's go find that request, open it up, and complete it with the information as needed. And I'm just scrolling over to show you the rest of the information included in these requests. Note too that for requests where I've added comments, such as the application number, you can see those listed here. All right, last, let's hop over into CART. So again, as I mentioned, for end users, planners, district conservationists, etc., your work is going to be on the CD side. So if your state is using a workload prioritization tool, you will log into CD, initiate the request, either a new request or an existing request, see the workload prioritization questions populate just as I demonstrated, answer those, save that information, etc. However, there will be a few folks at your state level who will be working to author and configure the workload prioritization tool for your use. So I'm going to hop over and show that based on the fact that I know we've got a mixed audience in this group, and some might be interested in kind of that back end piece of how the workload prioritization tool is created. So again, your state manager, your state business tool coordinator, et cetera, are the folks that are going to go in and create this on behalf of your state. By going into CART, the workload prioritization tool display groups are surveys. So we can find those by selecting the display group type, workload prioritization. I'm going to go ahead and search. And in this example, I'm going to pull up the same tool that we've been demonstrating. So I'm going to look for active, not draft, workload prioritization tools. And I'll specify my state. So again, this one is in the District of Columbia. So if I open up the workload prioritization display group, you can see there are different sections. And again, a lot of states that use these tools set their display groups up similarly, where you have a section of general questions. And these were the first things that kind of displayed. Again, if you remember, we specified our client was a veteran farmer. And then we also specified what type of request. And then lastly, we indicated whether or not it was a particular program or other, right? So these are all kind of those general type questions. And then you can see here, there's a section for each of the conditional type questions. So again, once we selected an option here for the type of conservation program, we were triggered down a particular path of conditional questions. One path for EQIP would have been a different path for CSP, ACEP, WRE, et cetera. I'll just look real quickly over at the EQIP section over here, just to kind of show you again, this is where the questions are populated. Nope, I'll go back. We've got a question about prior performance. We've got a question about client responsiveness. And then we have that last question about our target area. Now I'm just going to expand just this one here about prior performance, just to show you a couple things. So if I go into edit this question, we can see the question at the top. We can see the answers at the bottom. Again, have they had prior assistance agreements? Were they on schedule? Had they been terminated, etc.? Each of these question responses is assigned a point value. You can see here, again, those that we want to prioritize have a higher point value, and those that we want to deprioritize have a lower point value. And the high, medium, and low designations for workload prioritization are based on a point scale of 100 points, meaning anything 68 points or higher would assign a high priority, anything 33 points or lower would assign a low, and anything in between would be medium. So showing this just demonstrates that you have a lot of flexibility in how you set up those point values, including being able to set negative points to make sure to deprioritize certain conditions. Speaking of conditions, I'm going to go to that next tab here. And again, when the user at the state level is setting up a workload prioritization tool, if they want to set conditionality or certain questions to only appear in certain situations, they would come do that under this condition tab. And you can see here I've set that up accordingly. So again, that prior performance question only appears if the user selects that they're applying for EQIP. So again, lots more information in here that can be had for those at the state level responsible for doing this. And we also have lesson plans that go into all of this in great detail. But I just wanted to give you a sneak peek to show you what it looks like on the back end for those state staff that are setting up the workload prioritization tools. And more importantly, again, what that looks like from the user perspective and how you can access existing requests or create new requests and generate the workload prioritization tool to prioritize your requests into high, medium, or low. All right, well, thank you for your interest and attention on my presentation regarding the workload prioritization tool. Next, I'd like to introduce Daria Scala to show us the CART dashboard.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everybody. My name is Daria Scala. I work on the Conservation Planning branch with the Conservation Planning and Technical Assistance Division. Today, I will talk about a new CART dashboard. The purpose of the dashboard is to show state level, county level, and land use specific metrics that relate to CART assessments. Next slide, please. The CART dashboard is available now at the link provided. The data are fiscal year data pulled from the Conservation Desktop and CART through NPAD, the National Planning and Agreements database. Data currently available in the dashboards is fiscal year 2021 to fiscal year 2024 data. In the future, we aim to have quarterly updates. We also aim to automatically connect these data updates through Conservation Geo. The dashboard allows users to interact with the data and see state and county level maps for key CART assessment metrics and results. All data used in the dashboard can be found at the NRCS Field State and Technical SharePoint site linked on the slide. Next slide, please. There are 4 dashboards included in this dashboard. I will show these in more detail during the demo. Here, I want to show you the broad overview and provide these views as a reference of what is available. This first dashboard shows a national overview and state-level maps for state-level metrics. You can select the fiscal year and see the total assessments, total acres assessed, percent of ranked assessments funded, number of CART users, number of clients, and assessments per user. We also show percent change from the previous year and a trend line for the metrics selected for the map. Next slide, please. We have 2 state overview dashboards. This first one contains most of the same metrics as the national overview, only now we show county level maps. You notice that the state rank is provided to see how each state or territory compares to others on a scale of 1 to 55, 1 being the highest value and 55 being the lowest value. For example, for total assessments, if a state is ranked 1, that means that that state completed more assessments in the selected fiscal year than any other state. Next slide, please. The second state overview dashboard contains another set of metrics focused on ranking. And again, the map shows county level maps for the metrics selected. Next slide, please. Our final dashboard included is the CART results dashboard. This dashboard shows a table and a map with CART results. The map on the right-hand side shows the benchmark condition or existing total average county level CART scores by that resource concern component, and then the planned condition or the planned total CART score for the same resource concern component. The colors indicate the differences in those CART scores compared to the threshold for that selected resource concern component. The table on the left-hand side shows the number of land units that are assessed for each resource concern component at the selected land use or county or state level or fiscal year of interest. And then you can see the number of land units assessed that are below or above the CART thresholds for each resource concern component, again at the benchmark level and then as the planned condition. Next slide, please. The About page shows more information about the CART dashboard metrics, including the links to the data. So you can go to this About page and learn more about how these metrics were designed and where to find the data. Next slide, please. Now I will show you a recorded demo of this dashboard in action. Hello, everybody. My name is Daria Scala. Today, I'd like to show you the new CART dashboard. This CART dashboard is made up of 5 pages. The first page has a national overview. There are 2 state overview pages, a page for CART results, and the last and final page, that's our About page that describes more information about the metrics and CART. The national overview page starts with these 6 metrics. You can select the fiscal year of interest here. And see how they change for total assessments, total acres, percent of ranked assessments funded, number of CART users, number of clients, and number of assessments per user. You can also see how that percent has changed from the previous fiscal year. On the right-hand side, you can see those metrics on a map for state level numbers. You can select any of these metrics to see on the map. Total assessments, acres, percent of ranked assessments funded, number of CART users, clients, and assessments per user. Note that when I change these metrics on the map, the trend line that is shown on the bottom left also changes. Next, we can view these and additional metrics for states and look at county level maps. Again, we can see our total CART assessments for that state or any other selected state. You can see total acres, number of CART users, and number of assessments per user on this page. You can select any of these metrics to view on the map and see county level maps. The selected metric for the map will also show as a trend line on the bottom left. The second state overview page shows more information about CART ranking assessments. Again, you can select the fiscal year of interest and your state. You can see number of ranked CART assessments, percent of ranked assessments funded, number of ranking pools, and clients for the state. You can also see the state rank and how it compares to the other states for that metric. On the right-hand side, you can see any of these metrics or the ones from the previous state overview dashboard on the map. You can also see that metric as a trend line on the bottom left. Note, you can export these dashboards as visuals or as data on the lower right-hand corner here. Please remember that these are internal NRCS data and should not be shared or distributed outside of the agency. The last page shows CART results. Here, you can select the fiscal year of interest, state of interest, county, land use, and the resource concern component results that you'd like to see on the map. The table on the left shows how many land units assessed through CART were below the CART threshold for that resource concern component for the benchmark or before condition, and how many were above. And then how many were below the threshold after we've done our planned condition total in CART, and how many were above. This information you can see on the table by different land uses, by all the land uses that are included in this filter. So I can select the land use of interest and only see results for that land use. The map shows the selected resource concern component here and the average county level results, CART results for that resource concern component. The color shows whether the average scores were above or below the CART thresholds. Again, for the benchmark condition or existing total on the top, and our planned condition or planned total on the bottom. And you can see I'm selecting different land uses, and I can compare my results for that same resource concern component on different land uses in the state of interest. The About page contains links to CART documentation and the data used in this report. It also describes the metrics used for this dashboard further. Thank you for your interest. If you have any questions, please reach out to the CART team. Thank you. Thank you for your interest in the dashboard. Next, I'd like to introduce Crystal Runji to show us the map templates and exporting geospatial data. Crystal?
Thank you, Daria. Yes, my name is Crystal Rungi, and I work on the Conservation Planning and Technical Assistance Division as the Geospatial Analyst for Conservation Desktop and CART. Today I'll be talking about the new functionality for the map templates and export geospatial data. This functionality is an enhancement to the workflow and is not required. Then I will turn it over to Annie Dunkel for a demo on how South Dakota is using the new functionality. Next slide. So the background when looking at this new functionality with the goal of allowing more flexibility for maps in Conservation Desktop was to consider the following. We wanted to maintain the correct margins and headers that was in Conservation Desktop, the ability to get the data and a map without having to go through all of the whole process of the conservation products. The legend would have to be where it is, and it would have the ability to have all the layers that you have turned on in ArcPro and can manage, and you can manage the legend. The national users need the ability to create a national template file that can be used, and the states needed the capability to customize the state map template and include the data from CD. The APRX file or the project file would need to be customizable and recognize what state template is available based off of the state the folder is in. Next slide, please. So the current workflow is only through conservation products to get a map for an ArcPro project. So the user would go to the table contents and click on the conservation products. Then from there, they would click on the products type and use the product category as conservation plan and the product type as conservation plan map. And then they would click next. Next slide, please. And then from there, the user would move through the 4 tabs. Once through the tabs, the user would need to wait for for it to process to create the product. Then would have the ability to download the product either as a downloadable product of a PDF or a download the ARC Pro package, project package. This APRX file that were included needed to be connected or linked to the file database when the project was opened. This didn't include a state template, and current functionality doesn't include the state template currently. Part has not been developed yet. But it does provide a file geodatabase of all the layers that were turned on in the map. Next slide, please. So if the user was just interested in just having the layers and being able to get them out of CD to be able to use in another software, they would have to click on each individual layer in the map contents. They'd select the features that they wanted. Sometimes you could some of the features or all of the features. Either way, they needed to select some features. They would right click on the layer to get the export selected. Then that would create a shapefile that could be downloaded and unzipped because it created a zip file. And they had to do this for each individual layer. And it did not create a file geodatabase. It just created shapefiles for each of the layers, which could be a little time consuming. Next slide, please. So with the new functionality, the users would just have to add a practice schedule to their table of contents. From there, they would just need to make sure all the layers that they were interested in exporting were checked on in their map, and then click the export geospatial data. When the pop-up screen from there, the pop-up screen with the templates that are available would come up. National templates will always be available. The state template will show up if one is configured for the state that folder is in. The download package is the next thing, and it will include being able to download to an ArcGIS Pro project, which included the template and the file geodatabase. And as you see on the screen, this one I used the example was for South Dakota. So the South Dakota template was added to the package, and so was the conservation plan map. These files would link into each other, be linked when you open the Arc Pro project, due to the fact that they're as long as they're in the same folder. This is covered in Lesson Plan 20.3. Next slide, please. So in summary, the configuration of templates was designed to be a quicker option on getting data and maps out of CD. And it allowed state templates with specific layers and symbology to be used. You can load more than one map, but the system picks the first one it sees to load it into Arc Pro. At this time, one template per state is only allowed, since a drop-down to pick the template would be a UI change, and that is a future release. This is an enhancement to the process. It is not required. So if you have any questions or enhancement ideas, please feel free to send them to me to the email that's on the screen. With that, next slide. I'm going to play a video of this process.
So in today's demo, we're going to talk about the new features that we used in CD, the data configuration for map templates, and then exporting geospatial data. So we're going to start off in Arc Pro. We have a map, and I'm going to show you how we did the template for the national, since I have national permissions for the national template, but it will work the same for the states to do their state template. So I have a template set up with my layers. I have a layout created that I'm going to use. So I just need to come in here and do a project template to a new project template. I'm going to give it to save it as a template file to my computer. When we go to the data configuration, it only accepts APTX files, which are project templates, and not a project file from ARC map. So I'll give it a name. I'm going to save it. See templates. Now I have an APX file. I'll give it a disk summary that I'm going to use it in Conservation Desktop. Tags, we can do conservation as a tag. You put whatever tags you want to use, and then I'm just going to include the toolboxes. You want to do that just because if you don't, then if the states have customized templates, it wouldn't include those in there. So I'm going to do an analyze. It's going to analyze it for any errors. We don't have any errors, so I can hit create, and then I'll just hit yes. It'll create a template package. Let's query in. Package is in progress. Okay, now my project has successfully completed, and it created the project template. If I go to my C drive, scroll to my C drive, under templates, I will have a template in here that is the National Conservation Desktop template APTX file. So that's a file I'm going to use when I go to configure Conservation Desktop. So I'm going to close out of Conservation Desktop. I'm going to go ahead and open up my CD. Okay, sorry. I closed out of Arc Pro and opened up Conservation Desktop, sorry. So now I'm going to go to data config. I have a data configuration role, and you need the data config admin role in order to do this. So I'm going to go on my initials, the CR, so to my profile. And then there's the option of data configuration if you have the data configuration administrator. In the past, those people are familiar with the geospatial services, which one is how we configure our data for CD. And now there's a geospatial templates. So I'm going to click on that. I have no template. So to add a template, I just click on add, and I'll add a template. So as you can see, since I have national permissions, my state is national, but whatever state you're in, that will show up for instead of national. So I'm going to name my template National Station template. You can give it a description. And CD. And then I'm going to choose a file, and it's giving you a message, or I already told you about this, that the acceptable file is the APTX, which is the template file and not the project file. So I'm going to choose a file. I'm going to go to see my templates. I'll look for my template that I just created, and then I'm going to hit open. Now it loaded it here, that this is the template. You can get rid of it, delete it if you added the wrong thing, and stuff. And if it didn't like it, it would give you a message. So I'm good to go. I'm going to hit add. It's going to add my template to my project, or under my geospatial templates. So now I have it here, the National Conservation Template, Houston cart. Under the action items, you have the ability to edit or delete. So when you're editing, it's only going to allow you to edit the description and the name of it. And then delete will let you get rid of it completely. This also will get rid of it on GeoPortal where it's stored. So I'm going to open up GeoPortal and so I can show you where it stores it on GeoPortal. So I'm going into GeoPortal now. I'm going to sign in. And under my sign in, if I go to contents, and then I scroll down to my files, it'll show up. It would show up under files in your GeoPortal. And for some reason today, it's being a little finicky and not doing that. So, so we're going to go ahead and close out of GeoPortal. And so now that we have our template in CD, I can go and close that out. And if I go and click on a customer, a case file, now I'm going to export the data and be able to show you that it will export the data and the template itself. So I'm going to go ahead and find myself. So I'm in the customer here. Okay, so now I have a customer open. I have a practice schedule open for that customer. Something to keep in mind that when you go to export, you have to have turned on, whatever you have turned on, that's what it's going to export in. So I'm going to make sure that I have my case PLU because that has all the attribute information. The practice schedule PLU comes in, but it's just, it shows only the, it doesn't give you all of the practice information or the case PLU does. It just gives you the outline, the polygon boundary. So when you want to have the metadata with it, you're going to want to make sure you have a case PLU so you have all the associated information with it. I'm also going to have my practice lines, polygons, and stuff all checked on. So anything that I want to see in my export, then that's what I'm going to check on. So now that I have those all checked on, I can come over here to export geospatial data, where in the past I had to right click on each individual one and go export selected on each one of these to add them or to export them out to a shapefile. Now when I do this export to geospatial, it'll automatically do all of them that I have checked on over here. So under export geospatial data, you have the template type. I could use my national one or the state. If I switch to the states, South Dakota has a template also that can be put in. So if I export it out for that, it would do that. As national, you can see I have my national conservation template that I just added to CD in the data config. So I'm going to go ahead and use that one. And he's going to demonstrate later the state one for South Dakota. So I'm gonna hit export. And I've done this a few times. So like for this project, so it has recent exports where I've done a South Dakota template and I've used other templates. So that's what it's showing here. But this is the one I'm doing right now. It's processing. It gives it the name of the template and then the schedule or the practice schedule name that you're using and then a timestamp, and it's a zip file. So if I look at some of these that are completed, under the actions, you have download ArcGIS Pro project, or you can delete them. So if you were to do, I'm going to go ahead and just do a download here just to show you what would happen while this one processes. So when I do a download to ArcGIS, it gives you a download of that template zip file, and then I can save it anywhere on my computer to be able to use, open, unzip, and use an Arc Pro. So Okay, so now my national conservation template has completed. So we hit the actions, go download ArcGIS Pro. So this is my template. So I'm going to go save as, and we're just going to put it in a file folder. For today's demo. Let's go template folder so I remember where it's at. So then I'll hit save, and then that saves it there. So then I just have to go in under this and go ahead and find it. Here's the National Conservation template, and then just extract it and unzip it. So I'll just do that. But as you can see, what it packages up is your conservation plan map, JDB, which has all of the layers that we had checked on. You have your case file, or the case PLU, the practice schedule PLU, and all the practice polygons, and then your national template. So you'll be able to open those up. So I'll go ahead and make sure I'm out of the zip file. So I've got the national conservation template. I can open up the national template. APRX. This is actually says the national template. APRX is the actual file that I used when I did the configuration, but when I in the configuration I named it National Conservation Template. So that's why there's a difference in names there. Okay, so now it loaded it up in my map. I have my conservation practices. It shows all of them, the practice schedules, and then here's all the stuff from my template, or my that my template had before. So we have all the practices came in, the practice schedule, the case PLU. I can zoom, let it load here. Okay, so here we are. It loaded in my land that I have checked on. So now I have your polygons, your practice schedule, PLU, which is the boundary, the case PLU, which is the planned land unit with the attributes of what the field number and the track number, and land use are associated with the case PLU, and then the rest of your practice practice lines and polygons that I had put in here. So with that, that's the end of my demo on bringing it into ARC Pro. I'm going to turn it over here shortly to Annie so she can demonstrate how to be able to utilize that. So hopefully you found some interest in this tool. Pretty excited to be able to have this functionality available to make maps a little bit have a little bit more flexibility in the map making. So hope you enjoyed this presentation today, and I'm turning it over to Annie.
All right. Thank you for watching. And now it's Annie Dunkel with South Dakota GIS Specialist.
Hi, yeah, thanks, Crystal. My name's Annie Dunkel. I'm a GIS specialist in South Dakota. Currently acting as the state GIS specialist for Florida. So, hi, Florida. We're excited in South Dakota about this functionality in CE to quickly export geospatial data and make customized maps when needed to make things a little bit more complex or change a little bit of symbology to get your message across to your producer. So I'm gonna show you guys how that we've made some customizations to our template for South Dakota to enhance the mapping experience for our South Dakota planners. So we can start the demo. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm gonna start off with how to extract the file that comes out of CD. And something to note is that you want to save this file someplace on your C drive, your F drive, or your S drive, depending on how your office organizes your GIS files. Sometimes your computer will default to wanting to save this project file in a location on your OneDrive. And ArcGIS Pro and OneDrive are not really good friends. It's not advisable to work with ArcGIS Pro project files in OneDrive. So just as a heads up, make sure that your project ends up somewhere on your C drive, your F drive, or your S drive. Just make sure that it doesn't end up in OneDrive. So I'm here in my C drive under a folder called Geodata in a demo folder. I'm going to right click on my file and hit extract all to unzip the file. You have to unzip the file in order to work with it. So it opens it up and creates a whole new folder with that same name. However, that's not a great name because it's always going to have the same South Dakota ArcGIS Pro template. It'll have the name of the file here and then this long timestamp. I want to do something a little bit unique to the actual project that I'm working on. So I'm going to rename the folder Demo Producer Equip 2025. And then within the folder, we have a few items that support the project. And then the project is this one file here that has that little blue icon. It's called an ArcGIS project file. The name also is going to be the same name every time you download this. So in order to make sure that you're not having 5, 10 of the same project names, I'm going to also give this a unique name for this particular project. And then once I've renamed it, I'm going to double click to open it up. Once the project is open, South Dakota's looks a little bit like this. So we have the default is the 14 North planning base map, which is most of South Dakota is inside of the 14 North UTM grid. We also cover 13. So I'm going to go over a few of the items that we have in our template. So we have 14 North planning base map, a 13 North planning base map, and then we have the same for a couple of cultural resources maps. We also have a map called Map of Layers You Can Copy. And you might be noticing, hey, where's the conservation data that they said that they promised me was going to be in here? Well, in a project that has multiple maps, you can't really choose where it ends up. And in the South Dakota one, it ends up in this one. And so it kind of ends up in this this map here. And then for us, we have a whole bunch of other reference data that we are making available for South Dakota users to copy and paste into any of the other maps that they want to use. So this is kind of just a repository of reference information. So you'll notice that conservation practice points and lines and polys are right there. If I right click on this and go to zoom to layer, it'll zoom me to my conservation data. Other things that are included within the South Dakota template are, we have a custom toolbox called SD Tools that has a couple of things that speed up the mapping process. And I'll show you guys those in a second, just in case you want to see them. There's a database that we attach that has some template shape files or feature classes that people can use and edit with that have a few things that auto calculate length and area so that people can get quick measurements using those. There's also some dummy data that I have set up for allowing people to copy labeling properties so that they don't have to build label definitions all on their own. We have quite a few layouts in this. So we have a few different cultural resources ones, a few of our engineering layouts that our engineering folks like to have certain projects done in, and then all of our plan mapping layouts. So all of these are available for people to switch out and not have to rebuild every time. We've also attached a few different styles, including our custom South Dakota symbology that folks use in our version of our field maps. So if people like using that symbology, they can use it on their map as well. And then some of the additional NRCS stylings. A popular one is the NRCS planning one, which is similar to the symbology that was used in Toolkit. So just to show you guys quickly how a user might kind of get up and running with this version, the South Dakota version, to make a map, is you can copy data from the map of layers that you can copy. So I can hold Shift on my keyboard and select my conservation data that I want to pull over into the map that I'm using, and right click and choose copy. And then I can go into my planning map and then right click on the map itself and choose paste. And then that will bring in my conservation data there. For South Dakota users, we have this tool that adds planning data to all the maps in the project, so you don't have to do that to every single one. It just kind of automates that for you. So you just double click on the tool and then click run. And then once that's done, when I open up another map, I'll be able to see that conservation data in there. This project area is actually located in the western side of the state, so I'm going to use the UTM 13 North planning base map for my mapping. So I'm going to go ahead and open that one. And you can see all that conservation data is now available in this map. Another thing that we've added is that if folks want to use preloaded labels, they can use this layers to copy symbology and label properties from. It's an empty data set with a few different styles. This is how I figured out to quickly make this work. Let's go with my case PLUs, which in this instance, I think the current iteration, there's not metadata in the practice schedule PLUs, it's in the case PLUs. So that's where we'll label all of our fields from. So I'm going to right click on case PLUs for labels and choose copy. And then on case PLUs, I'm going to right click and choose paste properties. And what that will do is take the symbology from one, paste it to the other super fast. And now I can see I have my field tracked, land use type, and the acreage. I'm going to also do that for my points. So I'm going to right click and go copy, and then paste properties for my points. And these add a few leaders to them and a halo on the symbols as well to make them a little bit easier to read. For the sake of seeing things a little bit better, I'm actually going to turn off my symbology for my practice polygon. And then I actually want to use one of my custom symbols that came in my project for the pipeline so I can see it a little bit better. So I'm going to find my livestock pipeline and then click on the symbol here. And then within my symbology, I have a planned pipeline symbol that just reads a little bit clearer on a map. So I'm going to choose that. And then I also have one for a fence that I like. So I'm going to click on my fence. And this is an existing fence. So I'm going to click that. Just makes it pop a little bit nicer. So I've spruced up my map a little bit. I made my symbology look better. I've added some labels that I like. It's not everything, but good for this purpose. And then I want to go and actually put this into an 8.5 by 11 map. Okay, so when we get to the layout, you'll notice that this map is actually using the map frame for the UTM 14 North base map. So I'm going to right click on the map frame and choose properties. And then on the right side, I actually want to choose from the drop down to show my 13 North base map. And it's going to zoom me predominantly to there. Didn't totally get me there. I can get to my area if I right click again on my practice points over here on my map frame, and I can zoom to layer. So I can right click on my map frame, choose to activate it, and then I can kind of zoom to my area. And then once I'm there, I can click this red X. You might notice that the headers are empty. You can click on each item and fill them in. However, for us, for South Dakota, we have a little tool that I built kind of borrowing some scripting language from the wetland tool and the HEL tool, which are national NRCS tools. So first off, it asks you what your client name is. So I'm going to put file producer. The service center is going to be Rapid City. I could digitize a point to grab the information of what my township section range is, or I can choose manual entry and I can just type it in. So we're section 34 in township on north, range for east. Once I've done that, I can hit run, and that's going to loop through every single layout in this project and add that information. So if I were to open up another layout, that information would also be available. So it added my name, my location, it pulled what county I'm in, did an approximation of the acres, has my name, the service center, and then it pulls the conservation district based off of the county name. It changed my location, so I'm just going to activate it and then kind of zoom back to where I want to be. That looks good. I'll choose X. So another thing that I like about this tool built in is that it cleans up the legend a little bit and gets rid of all of the things that are not actually being shown on the map from the list of items that are available as different practices. So it really cleans up your map a little bit. And then last thing, a nice thing to do is make sure that the scale is set to a good even number. So 1 to 24,000 is really good for this size. That means that 1 inch will equal 2,000 feet, and that's listed here on my layout as well for anybody as a reference. And when I'm all happy with the way that this looks, I am going to go ahead and export this so I can print it as a PDF and put it in the file, or I can upload it to the file as well. So I am going to go to Share, go to Export Layout. I can choose my export type. I'm going to choose PDF. And then I want to make sure to give it a name that's unique. It's going to give it the name of the layout by default. So I'm just going to say demo, producer, and map 2025. Take a look at the other settings, and then I'm going to click export. Okay, so it is done exporting, and I can just click on view exported file, and that will open up my PDF. And so I can go ahead and print that and put it in my file. So that's the gist of what South Dakota has done for tweaking the templates for Conservation Desktop. We are definitely looking forward to hearing feedback from our users in South Dakota, and we'll make tweaks as we go. We really love that we can make some changes and update and improve this fairly easily. So I hope you guys got some good ideas, and I hope that you guys use this as a really nice tool to make maps and get more comfortable with using ArcGIS Pro. Thanks. Okay, so I'm going to start off.
Great, thanks for watching that demo, and thank you all for having me today. I'm gonna pass it off to Chrissy for questions and answers. That's it. Thanks.
All right. Well, great job. Great job. So we got to see some cool stuff today. Thank you, Annie. And thank you, Crystal and Jennifer and Daria for going through all the new things. We do have a lot of questions. So today we do have a little extra time. So we're still pulling the questions in. So if you have something that you want to ask, feel free to do it. And we'll answer as much as we can. So I'm going to go ahead and start. The first question is for Jennifer Chin. The question is about workload prioritization. Is the workload prioritization used to rank projects? Example, a low priority score 600 on the ranking, a high priority scores 100 on the ranking. The high priority with the lower ranking score gets funded, but not the low priority with the higher ranking.
Appreciate that question from whoever sent it in, and thank you for sharing it with us, Christy. So just want to be clear that we're talking about two separate things. So the workload prioritization is used to prioritize the order with which to service requests, going through that assessment, planning, and potentially ranking process. It's not directly impacting those ranking scores. So going back to the questioner's initial ask, you know, that 600 ranking would be funded before the 100 on ranking would be, right? If we're funding going through from top to bottom, regardless of the lower high priority, because we're using those tools to do different things, right? We're just prioritizing with the prioritization tool, the order with which we're servicing those requests. So I just want to make sure we understand those are two separate things, and once we've proceeded past the prioritization, and if we're ranking applications and evaluating ranking scores, we're starting at the top and working our way down.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. Okay, the next question is for Mary Williams. So this question is, please emphasize that all need to be ranked. That is not currently the use of the workload prioritization. It is being used to cull ranking by not doing mediums or lows unless funding becomes available.
Hi, Crystal. Thank you. This is Mary. I'm speaking from the policy side. Basically, yes, you are. We do need to rank all applications. And yes, we do. And especially when we're looking at from the easement side, easement has the rule that all applications have to be ranked no matter what. And we do still need to look at every application and make sure we rank. The only thing the tool does is help us prioritize the work as it comes in. So if you do, and we do tell you sometimes you have to look at it from the standpoint that if your state has ran out of funding, you don't have to rank the lows, the mediums, or the lows if you can't get to those. But if you have ranked them already, you've already captured some of that workload. So you do need to rank all applications as they come in. But I do know that Eastman has that rule that every application that they receive has to be ranked no matter what.
All right, thank you, Mary. Back to Jennifer. What are the steps to ensure the workload prioritization tool is accurately picking up on the projects that would rank the highest?
Oh, good question. And I'm going to answer with a non-answer directly to the question, but just say that, obviously there's a lot of factors that go into those results, and those are going to differ by state, right? So I just want to reiterate, that's why it's so critical that if you're evaluating whether or not your state should use a workload prioritization tool, in doing that, be sure that it's a collaborative effort with your programs and other staff within your state leadership, as well as other groups such as your state technical committee and others who might be able to lend insight on making sure to prioritize the right work in the state. So again, I apologize for giving a non-answer kind of an answer, but it's just so variable that I just want to point back to the need to be able to work with your other SMEs within your state and others to come up with that information. The other piece I'll add to that is as we go through the process, I showed that kind of stair-step slide that goes through the process of starting a workload prioritization tool and getting it all the way through to publishing and making it available. There is a review process that we go through with those tools, both from the FAPD side as well as CPTAD. So there's a back and forth discussion about questions that are appropriate, wording changes that might be needed, et cetera, just to ensure that any state that's using it is aligned with policy. So hopefully between that collaborative effort within state, you can help focus on those key items your state wants to use. And then that review process that I just communicated will help make sure that whatever's decided on is aligned with policy and what's allowed.
Right, thank you, Jennifer. I'll tackle the next one. This is on the assistance request report that Jennifer showed. One of the folks noticed that it also has CRP on it, which is a FSA program that we support with our CRP plans. And the question is, should we also include ECP request as assistance request? So there's some different ways you could do this, and this will be kind of up to how your state wants to do it. But just want to explain, the assistance request report is going to pull all types of requests. So we have brief technical assistance, site visits, conservation plans, CRP plans, and then there's some other types of requests that do come directly from farmers.gov. For ECP, you would have some options of, you could enter a site visit if you don't need to add a practice to a practice schedule or create a practice schedule. But if you do create a new practice schedule, Desktop automatically creates a conservation plan request. When we do that from the practice schedule and the table of contents, you would need just to go back in and update the program. There's a request details page from CTA General to ECP. So and that would work the same way for the site visit. Just make sure you update the program field so that way you can track those ECP requests that you're doing if you're doing site visits for other programs. All right, so we're back to Jennifer Chen on the next question. This one is, if we are prioritizing brand new clients to NRCS, should we have new clients as an option in the workload prioritization tool?
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that question as well. Lots of good questions coming in on the workload prioritization tool, and I appreciate it. I'll provide a response, and I'll kind of harken back to some of the comments I've already made. Is that if your state decides that you want to prioritize requests from new clients, then yes, you would be looking to add that as a question within your workload prioritization tool. I showed on my demo an example of how that might look as far as the type of request, if it's from a new client or an existing client. But of course, you can, there's options with how you want to word that or how you can word that. I just, again, caution you that if this is something that is of interest, make sure that it is supported by your state leadership, and then ensure that we're following policy requirements as we go through development and that review process.
All right, we'll keep Jennifer on camera because the next one's for you as well. And this one's a little bit long, but just wanted to go ahead and ask. The workload prioritization tool question regarding failed to properly operate and maintain presumes that all responsibilities on the client. We as NRCS staff have a responsibility to ensure we did all we could to assist the client in that proper maintenance. Are we allowing for NRCS staff who simply don't like a client because they disagreed with them to reduce the client to a low priority? A better question would be, was poor maintenance identified on a document during maybe a quality assurance review or a spot check that is within the control of the client? Please attach the documentation, maybe add has agreed to corrective action and passed an agreed due date.
Appreciate that, and I'm nodding and shaking my head as you were reading that off, Christy. Certainly, absolutely not. We aren't going to utilize this to deprioritize clients we disagree with or we've had some negative history with in the past. But to your second half of that question, to whomever posed it, to say, a better question would be poor maintenance identified as documented on a quality assurance review, et cetera. I was nodding my head because those are great examples of some of those items that I talked about in my presentation, right? Making sure that we've got transparency and clarity, and we can point back to documented actions, be it particular cutoff dates or points in time, or particular documents that support the designation, such as poor performance. So to the state that asked that, do not deprioritize folks that you have bad history with, and ensure that it's transparent that you're not doing that, right? That you can point to those documented situations, be it those 153s or other items, et cetera, that point to supporting that designation in the workload prioritization tool. So again, just making sure that we're transparent and clear. And then again, I'll reiterate that if you're not certain if you're transparent or clear enough in your question wording, you can always reach out to Mary or myself and ask those questions, or we can have those conversations as we go through the review process.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. I'll take the next one. This one is basically on how do I tell which request was automatically created when a practice schedule was created. I found where you can see the practice schedule on the request is associated with, but then I have to open each one to see what the schedule is. Anyway, they're looking for some help on the easier way to do that. So a little background. So every time you create a practice schedule, it's going to create a new conservation plan request. So if a client has multiple practice schedules, you're going to see multiple requests. If you open from the table of contents on the left-hand side, there's a view request option, and it's going to display all of the assistance requests, all types of requests, and they're displayed in chronological order. So you'll see the newest on top down to the oldest ones. But you're correct, the practice schedule doesn't display in that view details page. So you would have to go through the actions menu and open it up the view details, which opens the case file and schedule. In these cases where you have clients that do have multiple assistance requests or practice schedules, probably the easiest way to see, which practice schedule is to run that assistance request report that Jennifer showed, because it does show the actual request ID along with the type of request and the practice practice scheduled name. That way you make sure you can open the correct one, but you can also then see all the details attached to all your request information. Like was mentioned today, the priority will be on there if you're using the workload prioritization tool as well. All right. The next question is, well, actually, we have 2 questions that are coming up, both for Mary. So, Mary, the first one is, in addition to or instead of having the which conservation program is this request for, could a state have a question that asks which area team will be working on the application? This way, local priorities can be built into the WPT tool in the same way the example shows, different questions associated with different programs.
Thanks, Christy. Yes. And I guess I was kind of reading a little bit more into this question, and hopefully I'm going down the right path when I'm answering this question. But I was thinking that the person was looking at if we had like an RCPP area or partnership area, an agreement in that area for that particular county. We have done some questions like that, and we just want the person who or the state, they can identify those different groups in that county, and we can actually help them prioritize those down to say those questions, because if they got like an agreement area in that particular RCP agreement wants to identify what they want to prioritize and group those applications, yes, we can prioritize it that way, and we have worked to identify that. So, and whenever they want to do something like that, they just contact me or Jennifer once get those questions set up, and we can address that accordingly. But it's just working with the state, and we can get those questions identified, and yeah, it can be addressed that way.
All right, thank you, Mary. The next question for you is, if we have one application that is applying across several ranking pool categories, some categories they would have been considered as a high priority, and other categories they would be considered a low priority. Does WPT have a way of handling this?
Well, I wanted to kind of back up a little bit and say, make sure, as Jennifer was demonstrating, that the WPT comes before we do any kind of ranking. This is coming before assessment. This is basically just helping a field office organize their getting their workload part, is getting it done that's come in the application. This is way before we do any ranking. So ranking, the categories actually take place when you're going into and after you've actually gone through your WPT. So there's no way that we can do any categories against a category. We should not be overlooking, putting categories against categories, because those typically are two different fruits. We don't want to get fruits mixed up that way. So I'm gonna lay that one and say no, we don't want to mix and match that way.
All right, thank you, Mary. Back to Jennifer. It looks like I've got 3 questions for Jennifer. Can WPT have GIS-based questions?
All right, asking the tough questions. No, I'm teasing. So unfortunately, this time, the WPT is not built out to be able to support geospatial questions or geospatial layers. It is an item that we have as an enhancement to the tool, but it's not available yet. So if you do have questions like that, you'll need to ask them and answer them manually within the tool, much like I showed in the demo when I talked about that target area.
Right. Thank you, Jennifer. The next question is WPT development in CART. Do you have an example template regarding questions and associated answers based on the topics of interest to the state, or should we review a WPT display group from other states that is active and thus approved by NHQ?
Great question. So short answer is yes. The workload prioritization tool that I used in today's demonstration in the District of Columbia is available on the training site and should be viewable and accessible. So that is one that we at the national level had worked on together to provide a set of questions that are examples that could be used by a state that have been vetted already. But of course, I'd also encourage you to reach out and take a look at other states that have used it in the past. And if you have specific questions on, who that might be or how to look at that, you can certainly reach out to Mary or myself. But definitely encourage you to take a look at other examples if you're interested versus having to start from scratch. Now, certainly you can customize things if your state has specific needs, but it's always nice to kind of cut your teeth on what others are doing. And it's also really good to collaborate with your neighboring states to see if they're using them as well for consistency's sake, because we often have producers that work across state lines or farm across state lines.
All right, thank you. And your last question, Jennifer, can you set WPT questions to apply to multiple answers? Example would be multiple programs associated with one request. Will all the answers and points add up if we use multiple answer questions?
Another good question. So I'm going to answer this a couple different ways. So first, I'm going to point back to the materials I presented, in that if you are using an example like I had shown, where you're having a kind of a jump off question of which program is this request for, and you have different questions assigned to EQIP versus CSP, let's say, versus RCPP, I would encourage you to create multiple requests for that client if that client is interested in more than one program, just so that you can reflect the answers to each path separately, right? Because one might result in a medium priority and one might result in a high. So there's kind of that example, which is what I focused on during my demonstration. I'm going to kind of also answer the flip side of that, which is, can a WPT be set up to include answers for multiple programs, kind of all bundled into one WPT response? And the answer is yes. Just remember that, again, the output of the tool is a high, medium, or low designation, qualitative field, right? High, medium, or low, but it is based on that point value of the sum of all the responses in the tool itself. So if you're a state that's working on a WPT, and I did this as well, it's kind of nice to have a side Excel record where you can start playing with the math and seeing what the different combinations of responses are that will come out to different point values, so that you can get an idea of whether that's going to equate to a high, medium, or low. But yeah, if you wanted to set up your workload questions that way to accommodate multiple programs within one, just remember that, again, it's that sum total of the points that's going to dictate what shows up high, medium, or low.
All right. Well, thank you, Jennifer and Mary. You're off the hook. That was a lot of questions, and thank you for answering those. We do have a question on the CART dashboard as far as how do you get to it. And after the call, we're going to post basically our slides, videos, other information to the We Are NRCS SharePoint, as well as sharing the materials with our partners that are with us. And so you'll have that link available, and we'll show it here in just a minute. In the slides, it's going to be under the references at the very end of the slide deck, but definitely we'll get that to you. So that is coming. The next question, I think there may be multiples here, Crystal, for you. The first one for Crystal is, if I have trouble getting CD to generate a single map, what length of time would be required to download the ArcPro layer package from the practice schedule compared to a map, and how likely would it be to fail?
Yeah, hey, that's a good question. With this package, it kind of depends a little bit too on the size of the template that the states have published. Depending on how much data that is, the size of that, and how much it has to pull over. But I've had good success with no failures with downloading these templates and the data, just because in conservation products, the failures are coming because it needs to go through the print service. And this isn't going through the print service to generate these. And every time that I've done it, it's only taken a couple minutes with the templates that I have.
All right, thank you, Crystal. You do have several questions here, so I'm going to go to the next one. How do I get the entire layer of all the conservation practice polygons, points in the layers, not just the ones included in the practice schedule, into ArcPro? Or are they going to auto upload with this template? I can't get CD to work right now to see it.
Yeah, that's a good question. At this point, with our extract tools and CD, export tools and CDs are all going to be linked to your practice schedule, and just giving you the practices based off of the practice schedule that you have loaded, whether you use the export selected or there's the export geospatial data that we demonstrated today. If you wanted all of the practices and polygons for your specific state, it'd be kind of similar to IDEA, and you'd have to probably use that new. You have what is called a geo extract that's new, and you would have to work with your business tools or state GIS specialist for that.
Right, thank you. You have a couple more questions here, Crystal. I understand that there can be only one national template and only one state template, but can planners create and save their own templates to desktop to use themselves when downloading future project files?
Yeah, at this time, no. Just because of the nature of how this was built, we are utilizing GeoPortal as our storage for that. You have to have publishing permissions to GeoPortal to do that, and so in order to link that into CD, we have to use the data configuration. So you'd have to have the permission that the data configuration administrator rule for that. So at this time, no, we don't have the ability to allow everybody to publish their own templates into that.
Okay, and just as a reminder, I will be sending out a feedback form. So if you have suggestions for enhancements and improvements, you will have that opportunity to give us that feedback if there's additional functionality you need to make that work better. The last question for Crystal is, are you able to reorder which practice polygons are shown up on top or below each once you get into ArcPro?
Yes, you have that ability. You have to go under symbology, and it has an up and down arrow, so you can change which symbols are showing in the order in that symbol selector there.
All right, thank you, Crystal. We're going to move to Annie. So Annie, you have one question. It says, "Hi Annie, is there for planners in other states a way to copy South Dakota's template, specifically the header and legend tool you developed for use in your state that don't already have a template developed yet?"
Yeah, so I can definitely share that with your state GIS specialist if they're interested in some of those tools in that toolbox. I'm happy to share it with them. So they would need to get that loaded into that template and uploaded for you guys. But happy to share. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, that is all I'm seeing in the questions. So thanks everybody for participating and submitting those questions, and thanks to all the speakers for answering them live. That's quite a bit for us to juggle on the back end, and so thank you for doing that. We did get a question as far as will you be able to go back and review the video? And yes, the video does stay active in the Teams, or I guess this is in the Outlook calendar, for 6 months. And so if you have staff that weren't able to watch live, they can also go to the video. You can go back to the video. Let's see, is this conservation information accessible by SPSD staff? So it should be available for anyone that has the appointment. So it's open to everybody. I'm not sure who SPSD staff is, but anybody that has the Outlook appointment can get it. If you don't have the Outlook appointment, or if they don't, you can forward it to them. This Outlook calendar appointment is open for everybody. All right, I think that is all we have for questions. So just want to say thank you for joining us today, and thank you for our speakers for sharing their knowledge. We covered a lot of information. As I mentioned, I will be sending out all attendees a feedback form and then a link to all of the resources that we shared today. We are going to be posting those on the We Are NRCS SharePoint site, so I'll send that link. But I'll also be sharing that with our National Conservation Planning Partnership, so they'll be sharing the same information with all the partners. I hope we can get to see you on November 19th. As we mentioned before, we're going to be covering the updates on the resource concerns, contracting efficiencies, planner flexibility, and easements 101. Really excited about that one. That's the last one for this year. But that concludes our user forum for today. Have a good day, everyone, and thank you for being here.